All right, welcome back, everybody. Sorry about that. I was having a few technical difficulties. So again, we're going to read Curious George Saves His Pennies by Margaret and H.A. Ray. So Curious George saves his pennies. Again, this is written by Monica Perez. It's a technical difficulty morning. So again, this was written by Monica Perez and illustrated by Mary O'Keefe Young. George was a good little monkey and always very curious, especially when he was in Tammy's toy store. There were so many things to wonder about: pogo sticks and skateboards, snow globes and kaleidoscopes, and even finger traps. But George's favorite thing to do in the toy store was to play at the train table. Today there was a new train. Its wood had painted bright red and it had a real working whistle. George held it up to show his friend, the man with the yellow hat. Not today, his friend said. We're looking for a birthday present for Noah. Remember? He's turning 5. What do you think of this? George helped his friend pick out a yellow and green hula hoop, while Tammy, the shopkeeper, wrapped the present for the birthday party. George wandered back to the train table. You see him check out his train. What were other things that George looked at? Do you remember? Which one do you think is his favorite? My guess is the train. I have a suggestion, George, said the man as he carried the gift over. Why don't you buy that new train yourself? The tag says $5. I'm sure you can save the money for it. George liked this suggestion so much that he was only a little sorry to put the train back down. George had a good time at the birthday party. Noah let everyone have a turn at the hula hoop. It was harder than it looked. You can see all the kids trying a hula hoop. Have you ever tried a hula hoop? As soon as George got home that afternoon, he took his piggy bank down from his dresser. He opened the small plug at the bottom and shook. Out tumbled a nickel. George ran to show the coin to his friend. Do you remember why George is looking at his money? Is it because of the train? You have 5 cents, the man said. I'll give you your allowance early this week. Don't spend it on candy. You'll have to save it up. The man gave George 2 quarters. Here is 50 cents, he said. Now you have 55 cents. You have only $4.45 left to save. George wasn't quite sure how much money that was, but it sounded like a lot. Does that sound like a lot of money to you? Sometimes it's hard to wait for something we want. George had to wait to buy the train until he has enough money, so let's see what he does. George dreamed about his red train that night. He was riding it through a forest of trees. He tugged on the whistle again and again so that no one could miss such a shiny red engine. In the morning, George decided he would have to find a way to earn money faster. What if someone else were to buy the red train at the toy store before he could? He had an idea. George found 5 pennies and a dime in the sofa cushions. Have you ever found money in your sofa cushions? He found a nickel under his bed. His piggy bank jingled nicely that evening. He had 75 cents saved. 1 more quarter and he would have $1. The next morning, George had another idea. He would get a job. Lucky for George, his neighbor, Mr. Reddy, needed help raking leaves. George wondered, nope, George didn't wonder. George worked all morning long. gathering armfuls of red, brown, and gold leaves to add to a growing pile in the center of the yard. Mr. Reddy brought out lemonade for the two to share. While his neighbor rested on the sun porch swing, George climbed a tree. What do you think George is going to do from that tree? Let's find out. The pile of leaves looked tempting from above. George wondered what would happen if, before he finished wondering, he had swung out of the branches and right into the center of the pile. The leaves crunched and crumbled and swooshed and swirled. What an adventure! Uh-oh, what's going to happen now that George jumped in his pile of leaves? Do you think he's going to have to rake them again? What hard work it was raking the leaves back up. But at the end of the day, Mr. Reddy paid him $2. George had $2.75 saved. That was almost $3. George spent many days doing odd jobs. He washed windows, he distributed flyers, he delivered flowers, and he did dishes. At the end of the week, George finally had $5. I'm proud of you, George, said the man with the yellow hat. You saved all that money. You've sure earned that train. The change clinked merrily in the piggy bank as George set off for the toy store. The autumn day was bright and clear and not very cold. George walked by the park. Who do you see in the park? The neighborhood children were playing with a windsock. Suddenly, it got stuck in a tree. They needed George's help. George carefully set his piggy bank down on a nearby park bench where he could keep an eye on it. But little monkeys sometimes forget, and as George began to play with the children, he forgot to check that his bank was still there. Oh no, what do you think has happened? As the afternoon wore on, his friends went home to have dinner. George rushed to the park bench where he had left his piggy bank. The toy store might be closing soon, but his bank was gone. Maybe George had the wrong bench. There were many in the park after all, but he was disappointed each time he ran up to another empty bench. George walked home sadly. He wondered how long it would take him to save $5 again. As George passed the toy store, he happened to look through the window. He couldn't believe his eyes. A little girl was holding his piggy bank. George rushed into the toy store just as the girl's mother was saying, "We found this across the street and waited for its owner, but it's getting late. We saw it has the name of your store on the bottom. Can you keep it in case someone comes to claim it?" George jumped up and down on the counter. "Why, George," Tammy said, "is this piggy bank yours? You're lucky. Hannah and her mother found it." Hugging his piggy bank tightly, George rushed over to the train section. He located the shiny red engine right away. As he carried it to the counter, the little girl looked at his train shyly. George realized he had not said thank you to her keeping his savings safe. He looked at his train. He looked at his piggy bank. He looked at Hannah. Good deeds deserve to be rewarded, he decided. George set the train down. He upended his bank on the counter and began to sort dollars and coins. So what do you think George is going to do now? George and Hannah walked out of the toy store that day, each carrying a train. George's small engine was not red, but it was shiny and blue, and he had paid for it all by himself. Best of all, he had a new friend who loved to play with trains almost as much as he did. So now we have read about Curious George, saves his pennies. And on the back, you can see that it explains about different dollar amounts. So the first one up here is with coins, and it says 5 pennies equals 1 nickel, and 2 nickels equal 1 dime. 2 dimes and 1 nickel equals 1 quarter, and 4 quarters equal $1. We also have 5 $1 bills equal 1 $5 bill, and 5 $1 bills equal 1 $5 bill. I already said that. All right, we're gonna go to the next one. 2 $5 bills equal 1 $10 bill. So as you can see, you can save up money by collecting coins and dollars, and you can find out what you're all gonna get. So a few questions for you. We found out that George could not find his piggy bank on the park bench. Have you ever lost anything? Or have you ever found anything that someone else had lost? What did you do with it? And how did George thank Hannah for keeping his bank safe? When other people help you, how do you thank them? So a few things that we can do is to practice our patience. So here's a few ideas. So right now, everybody's gardening. So if you haven't done a garden yet, you can plant some seeds in a cup or in a garden and wait for them to grow. And together with your child or children with your parents, you can take care of the seeds to help them grow. So yesterday, I noticed on my tomato plants, I had 3 tiny little green tomatoes, and I'm so excited because it's the first time I've ever planted a tomato plant in a pot. So I had to have patience because I planted them about 3 weeks ago. And so it was very exciting yesterday to finally see tomatoes on my tomato plant. Another thing you can do is to plan something special with your child, like a play date or a trip to the park, or maybe somebody's coming to visit. So my aunt is coming to visit me next Monday. And so that is 6 days away if I include today. So what you can do is to cut paper strips from a piece of paper. And then you're going to take your piece of paper strip, and we're going to make a paper chain. And so you just simply put the cut piece of paper in an already circled up piece. And then you're going to glue or tape it. So I don't have glue, so I'm going to use my trusty tape and tape it on up. And then we're going to hang this someplace that we can see it and know how many days it is until our special event happens, so we can practice our patience instead of us always asking, how much longer? When are they going to come? That kind of stuff. So if my aunt is coming on Monday, we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So since today is Wednesday, I can take one of these off because I'm a day closer to my aunt coming. So I'm just going to tear it, and then I can throw that away or recycle it. So now my chain has gotten shorter. So now I know that I have 5 more days to wait before my aunt comes to visit me on Monday. So that is another activity you can do. The third one is for us to practice patience, is that if you go shopping and your child wants something and can't have it, try a different way to distract him or her. So you can play the I wish game. If you've never played it before, this is how it goes. So you could say, I wish I had all the toys in the store. Wouldn't that be fun? We could play with them for days and days. How many toys do you think are in this store? Or you can distract from the gimmies by refocusing attention. How many colors do you see in this package? Or there's a lot of toys in this aisle. How many can you count? So it's important for us to also model patience. So those are just a few activities you can do with Curious George Saves His Pennies. So I just wanted to say that Money As You Grow bookshelf is from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as well as it was developed with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Center. So next week, please come back and join us and you can check out the Scott website or the Carver County website to learn about what materials you need for our activity that we'll get to do together. Thank you for joining me today. Sorry about the technical difficulties.